Coming up on the Together for Good podcast, everyone is talking about artificial intelligence. What does it mean? Should we be scared? And more importantly, I want to talk about what our faith might have to say about all these new advancements in technology. It's going to be a fun one. Here we go. Welcome to the Together for Good podcast, a podcast created by Bethany Lutheran Church in Cherry Hills Village, Colorado, and hosted by me, Pastor Nate Preisinger. On Together for Good, our goal is to provide practical, engaging content that supports you without expectations. Whether you're feeling disconnected from traditional religion or simply exploring what faith means in your life, we're here to walk alongside you. No matter where you are on your journey of faith, we're glad you're here. Welcome to Together for Good. So AI, artificial intelligence, it is everywhere that we look nowadays, and the topic of discussion and op-eds in the newspaper, just everywhere you look, somebody's talking about the implications of this technology for the future of our world. And so obviously, if you're a thinking person of faith, you're wondering, how does any of this fit in with my life of faith, and what does it mean? For those who don't fully understand, I don't know a lot about AI. I use it from time to time. Absolutely. It's an incredible tool. And I'm going to give you the briefest history of what I know. In December of 2022, so just about 3 years ago now, one company really went public, shall we say, not in the stock trading sense of it, but with their technology. And so they'd been working on this type of large language learning models for years, and finally released it for the public to use. That was ChatGPT, which launched in December of 2022. There's been so many additions and iterations and other technologies, but it all is kind of very similar in the ways that it works. Basically, as I understand it, what ChatGPT can kind of do for you is the way I heard it termed is that it's like a 15-year-old who's read the entire internet. And so it takes all of the public information that's out there on the web, literally all of it, and it processes it and then predicts the words to put in order that will best satisfy your question. When you put it like that, sounds really unremarkable and like it's not going to work. And yet they have fine-tuned this technology enough that when you ask it, hey, I have a gluten allergy and someone coming over who's a vegan, and these are the ingredients that I have in my pantry, what recipe can I make? It can do that for you just through this process of kind of guessing and determining with the highest probability what words should be pushed together in order to form an answer to your response. I know, it's crazy. And yet you think about all the information that's out there on the internet, and if you could somehow access all of it in a moment, and then with incredible computing power, process and determine what works best together based on all this data that's out there, you start to see, maybe you'll get a little glimpse of how AI works and why it's so powerful. The internet really became mainstream when I was a kid. And it happened, I would say when I was in 5th grade is the moment when all of a sudden we were told in classrooms to use the internet for our work. Some of you are probably much older than I am, Pastor Gary, looking at you. And so I know that you also probably have a moment in your mind where the internet really changed things. And we look now at how different our lives are post-internet to pre-internet. I'm pretty confident that AI is going to be a similar marquee moment in our life and in our history, that we will remember what life was like before it became mainstream and then after it became mainstream. I think about my kids and that this will be a real marking in their growing up process, just like the internet was for my growing up process, and just how differently I approached schoolwork, research, et cetera, after the internet came into my life. AI will be similar, and it's going to change the way that we have to teach and then we have to learn all of this. But what are the implications for us as people of faith? Here's why I'm hopeful, okay? I think that with all of this technology creating more and more stuff that we no longer can know if it was from a human being or from a computer, I think that's going to force us and to make us long for real human connection, experiences, etc. I heard it on a podcast that I listened to recently where there was a person wondering what they should do for their social media. And the host of the show said, like, I don't know how much time and energy you should give to social media, because I think in about 5 years, people are really going to be done with it. Now, that might be a little too optimistic, but in the same sense, we're quickly approaching the point where you don't want to see what's on the internet anymore because you don't know if you can trust it. You don't know if it's real. And so you're going to want to, again, my hopeful perspective is that people are going to want to be in person more. And there will be a renewed appreciation for retreats, a renewed appreciation for in-person town halls and workshops and keynote speeches. You want, to quote Hamilton, to be in the room where it happens, because then you can know for sure this is a real thing and not some AI-generated lie that just happens to look real and realistic. And with this, notice how this pushes us, this advent of AI, this hopeful picture that I have for our AI anxiety. Notice how it seems to be forcing us into the spaces and the ideas that, frankly, the scriptures speak about from the very start. I think that community and human relationships have always been at the heart of the gospel, in the very essential sense that we believe in a God who is incarnational, a God who became flesh, incarnate. And so that reality of Jesus, of God coming down and being born of a human mother for our sake to live and move and share life amongst us, shows us that God is intimately concerned with real life human experience. And not only that, but it shows that this is a part of God's hope for the world, for this creation, is that we would value relationships just as much as God values relationship with us. Yeah, and that in-person communal experience really was at the very heart of all that Jesus said and did. Not only was Jesus God incarnate, God becoming close and in relationship and in community with us, but additionally, all of Jesus's ministry seemed to try and point the people towards that. Hey, Pharisees, don't value your laws and your rituals and rules more than you value the life and worth of a person. That was one of Jesus's constant complaints. The parable of the Good Samaritan that everyone loves is about a Levite and a priest who passed by a man who is in need because they knew the laws that said touching this man on the side of the road would make them unclean. But along comes a Samaritan who's supposed to be the enemy, but he is the one who shows mercy. And that is what our call is to see real people in front of us and to notice the ones who cross our path and to value human relationship more than our cooked up religious rules. More than that, I'm also always so struck by the ways that Jesus's healing miracles really seem to point to a valuing of relationship and community. It's not just that Jesus sees the people who are hurting and who have been cast out from society, but notice that in healing them, Jesus is not only restoring their health, but he's restoring their social participation as well. Because if you were a leper, you had to go live in the leper colony outside of the city, and you couldn't participate in the normal ways and rhythms of life. You just had to live with your other unclean people, completely separate from everything else that was going on in the town. When Jesus heals those people, they are now restored, not just physically, but socially. They're restored to the communal happenings of that town or of that village. They no longer have to live on the outskirts, shunned and pushed aside, but they can fully reintegrate into the life of the community, because that is so much of what God wants for the world. That is what Jesus is envisioning and bringing about when he talks about the kingdom of God. It is a place where all can be one, where relationships matter most of all, and where mercy is extended over and over again. Additionally, I think there's something very compelling about the way that Jesus told stories. It's not just that he did miracles, he also was a storyteller who was constantly sharing these peculiar parables that are rich with depth and meaning. And he never told you exactly what it was about. Every now and then it'll tell us in the scriptures that Jesus went and told the disciples privately what he couldn't say in front of the crowds. But I think what Jesus was also doing there is by telling these strange parables, he was inherently creating community. He was creating discussion and perplexity and interesting dialogue amongst the people as they tried to figure out what Jesus might be talking about and what this strange story might mean for their collective lives. He was creating conversation by not just giving them the answer directly. If you've ever had a professor or maybe a pastor who could do that as well, I think that's the heart of what Jesus was trying to do for us. Like, hey, let's create conversation here. Yeah, this being human thing is difficult. And yeah, where does God fit into our walk of life of faith and these difficulties we face along the way? And Jesus says, like, well, like, let me tell you a story about that. And he shares a story that's a little strange and has some odd details, and it gets people talking. Yeah, what do you think he meant by that? Like, well, yeah, well, here's how I hear it. Yeah, well, here's how I hear it. As a Lutheran pastor, this is very much how we approach the study of Scripture. We really believe that the Bible needs to be read in community and studied with other people and not just pushed off alone by ourselves. Or Martin Luther's original critique was that it was just the priests who got the chance to tell you what the Bible said. No, this is a book that's supposed to create conversation. And in our dialogue, in our struggle with these stories, we will grow closer to understanding who God is and what that means for our life. And we can't just do that alone. We can't just do that with easy answers. It has to happen through dialogue. I don't fully understand what I'm about to tell you about. So you can ask AI and maybe that'll help. I know that the philosopher Hegel, who I brought up before, who I really don't fully understand his writings completely because it's complex stuff, but the more I dig into his philosophical thought, he talks about the dialectic process and just how important it is for things to, like spiral dynamics, for things to continually evolve, for iron to sharpen iron. In the dialectic process, the idea, again, very broad strokes, I'm not a doctor, I don't fully understand it, but it seems that you kind of come with an initial point and then someone provides the counterpoint. And then you provide the counterpoint to the counterpoint. And this back and forth process, struggling with thought in this spiral type of sense, just gets us to a more generous, more complete whole through that dialectic process. And I really think that the study of Scripture is a part of that. I really think that Jesus's parables are a part of this dialectic process too, in that, we as humans shouldn't just arrive at one answer and stick with it all the time, but recognizing that we've so much to learn from one another. Yeah, human relationship really helps us discover a more beautiful, more generous whole, a more, in democracy, a more perfect union. Yeah, democracy is built on the dialectic process of like, hey, this is going to take a long time and we're not going to agree, but we're going to compromise and we're going to, debate about these different points. And through that struggle and that tension, maybe we will create a more perfect union as a result. That's a pretty good example, actually, of this dialectic process lived out. And again, I think it's what church community is for. I think it's what the parables were about. And with all this to say, I think it's what AI can't give us. Maybe you could use it to offer you counterpoints to ideas that you have. I guess that would be in the spirit of what I'm talking about. But I think the value of human relationship and conversation and disagreement, and yet unity despite disagreement, that's going to become exceedingly important, because we can't just expect or hope to have all of our ideas affirmed all the time. And that's what AI can do for you. This is one of the most frustrating things I found in using the technology is I'll say like, hey, what do you think about this idea? Here's what I'm thinking. And it's always so affirming. And at first I loved it because I just want to be told I'm doing a good job. But after a while, it's also like, oh my gosh, like, come on, like, please, like, give me some pushback here. It's not a great idea. This needs some real help. And that's what I'm coming to you for, ChatGPT. And you're not giving it to me. But I think that this is where the technology will ultimately fall apart and potentially could ruin us too. Not to feed into the anxiety, but the scriptures are so clear that idolatry is one of the big things we need to be so careful of. The very original sin of Adam and Eve is that the serpent tells them, if you eat that fruit, you will become like God. Because that's really the longing that lives within every human being, whether we want to acknowledge it or admit to it or not. It's like, yeah, like at the end of the day, I just want to be in full control. I want to be like God. But where that leaves you is that then you have to save yourself, which you can never do. And that's what the Bible is constantly telling us. Like idolatry is the chief sin of them all. When God lays out the 10 Commandments, you shall have no other God before me, was the very first one that God offered. And if you look at it, the 9 commandments that follow, if you keep the first one, you probably won't break any of the other 9. But the moment we shift into idolatry and starting to think that we are God and that we can save ourselves, that is the moment that we will inevitably find despair. We need a force outside of ourselves to save us. We can't do this on our own. And AI can give us the illusion now that maybe we are gods unto ourselves. We can create universes with just a few keystrokes. Lovely. That will never fulfill us or save us in the end. We need something bigger than, yes, even a computer algorithm that's predicting the next possible word in a sentence. We need something stronger than that. And as I've been saying all along, we need each other too. Part of the importance of the dialectic process of our democracy being about conflicting views, but compromise and debate is that we have to then, we need the other to point out to us the parts that we aren't seeing. Because as powerful and intelligent as we think we are, there's always an angle that we haven't considered yet, or a life experience that we haven't had yet. And so there's a blind spot there. And that's what community allows us to discover. It's like, oh my gosh, I can learn so much from you about your life experience because it's completely different than mine. And I never saw the world in that way. And I never thought that way. But I'm so glad to learn from you about this. This is one of the key pieces here at Bethany that we try and lean into is this idea of unity. And it's hard and it's messy, but it just seems so important in this day and age to be able to learn from someone who I don't agree with and to create an environment where that can continue to happen. Because there's so much out there that can just affirm all of my ideas. Yeah, I can find anything on the internet that's going to tell me I'm doing a great job and I'm absolutely right. And I can also have ChatGPT create me a picture or a movie or an article that just reinforces everything that I believe. But where I'll really grow is when I talk to another human being and where I learn from their experience and where their unique perspective completely unsettles me and shifts me out of my perspective. Because that's just the thing, you can't shift yourself out of your own perspective. That's inherently, by definition, impossible. And so anyways, more than anything though, this AI anxiety that we're all living with in different ways and worried about how it might replace us or change us. Yeah, I'm hopeful that it might drive us back to understanding the importance of human relationships again, because I think we've lost that in a lot of ways. And I think there's so much good that comes from learning from other human beings. And I think it's so much of God's message for us, so much of Jesus's ministry on earth was to teach us the value of relationships. But the other part to all this is that I think AI, in the way that it's going to make us way more productive than we've ever been, maybe it can also help us hang on to that spark that makes us human, which is that we are more than our tasks. AI can do so many tasks for us. It can complete so much work in such a short amount of time. And will that hopefully help us distinguish ourselves from the machines? Because we do a bad job of that right now. I think we often have this mindset that we're just a machine, that we're a human doing, not a human being, as I've heard it said before. And we need to be reminded that we're so much more than the tasks we complete, that there is a spark of the divine within each of us, that we are created in the image of God, as it says in Genesis chapter 1. And so there's inherent value in each human being, and we're so much more than the tasks we do. It's why God commands us to remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, because we need that reminder that we're not just the things that we accomplish. In our fast-paced driven world, I think that also might be a hopeful angle of this whole AI phenomenon. I shouldn't even call it a phenomenon, because I'm pretty sure it's not going anywhere, just in reality of how much it's accomplishing. But notice how all of these pieces of what AI can do for us, there is a hopeful angle here that it might push us back towards some of the truths of our life of faith, that relationships matter and that we are more than what we accomplish. And if we can keep those things in mind, I really am hopeful for the future. And where I want to kind of conclude all of these thoughts is just by saying that a belief in hope, a trusting in hope, a faith in hope is also so much of where we as Christians are continually called to reside. We believe that there is a God who has a much longer term plan than just this present moment. And so as anxiety ridden as this moment may feel for each of us for different reasons, we are called again and again to trust that God is already at work and that God has a more beautiful conclusion to this painful moment. Right? God exists in a way that is completely outside of time. And so it's interesting to know that God is present with us in the struggles of this moment, but also God already knows how the story is going to end and where this is all leading. And there is a restoration and a hopefulness that we can cling to, that our faith invites us into, even when things seem really hard, even when we're really worried about this or that or the next piece to it. There is an eternal promise that's so much bigger than the present moment. And as Christians, yeah, if things do get really bad, I encourage us to trust in that deeper, longer term hope that's based on something eternal, not something temporary. So there's a lot of thoughts about AI anxiety, and yet how our life of faith specifically speaks to this present moment and where it calls us forward. I hope this might be helpful to you. I hope I didn't mess up too much of my explanation of Hegel or large language models. Please send this to family members or friends who might be in need of a message of hope in the midst of this technology change in our world. And as always, friends, stay in peace. Thank you for listening to the Together for Good podcast. If you'd like more resources for your walk of faith, please visit our website, bethany-denver.org, or download our mobile app by searching Bethany Connect in your phone's app store.